What kind of name is Chance? Well, my mama took one. Welcome, everybody, to Couch Potato Theater here on the Fandom Podcast Network. We are discussing the 30th anniversary of Hard Target, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. And as he famously said, hunting season is over. But you know what? This man had a glorious mullet, and we have a very special guest that knows this. But I thought I'd share my mullet here from high school. I'd like to introduce, first of all, my brother from another mother, co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network, Mr. Kyle Wagner. Kyle, do you have a mullet like this?
I have never had a mullet like this, but I do have to say the gumbo is tragic, the hair is long and wet, and the arrows are stainless steel. Let's do something.
Well, I had to showcase a mullet because I have a suspicion that this movie might have had some inspiration on one of the most awesome podcasts on the Fandom Podcast Network, and that is Lethal Mullet. And the host of Lethal Mullet from Down Under is Adam O'Brien. What's going on, brother?
G'day, mate. How you going? Yep, it certainly was a huge inspiration for all of us who had mullets at the time in the early 90s, thanks to all those crazy hair metal bands at the time. But also, isn't it the coolest mullet you've ever seen and one of the best Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, if not the best? And it's a John Woo film.
It's true. Now, I'm going to ask you something about something you just said, but I do ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, can you grade that mullet I had there going into my 12th grade of high school?
I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10.
6 out of 10. I'll take that.
I'm going to say, Kevin, that's a 5, only because I just rewatched Hard Target, and so the bar is set high in my mind right now.
Now, Adam, you are here because we love action movies, and of course, you showcase action movies on Lethal Mullet. The name of your podcast is called Lethal Mullet. I need to ask you straight from the beginning here: is Hard Target one of the reasons why you called your podcast Lethal Mullet?
Oh, without a doubt. Between this and, say, Kurt Russell's glorious mullet, this is, without a doubt, one of the quintessentials. I mean, you got action that is done in slow pace, and then the mullet just flicks around in every move. You know, whether it's a kick or a punch or the double guns that we see John Woo do when he's directing these films. And, you know, Van Damme, of all things, doing those spin kicks and that balletic displays that he does, really, it needs a mullet. And it does very well in this. And even carried into Time Cop with that fluffy mullet.
Yeah, and it's amazing in this movie, though, how, like, it's always wet. You know, it always has that.
Kevin, you lived in Georgia for a while. You understand the laws of humidity.
Yes, this is true. But, man, that thing is just like, it was gloriously damp the whole movie. So, yeah.
It's got that styling moose that just wants to stay in place, say, with those glorious hair extensions he had.
So we are technically doing this again, Kyle. This is a rematch because we have done Hard Target before, but it was way back in the days of Fandom Podcast Network, before video, before we were on YouTube. So we wanted to celebrate, which is now this year, 2023, August. This movie came out in August 30 years ago. I remember seeing it in the theater. Let's start there. When did you first see this film, Adam?
I saw this would have been at the movies, at the cinemas at the local, at Loganholme, or what we call the Hyperdome Hyperplex cinemas at the time. And where I saw the first inclination of this movie was I think it might have been, just trying to think of the movie. That'll come to me in a sec. But basically, it was a huge screen of TVs. You know how they used to have those walls of TVs, and they link them all together and have a trailer, right? That's basically what they had in the Australian cinemas. And I saw this Van Damme with long hair, which I'd seen him at some awards thing at the time with the weird long hair. I'm going, is he trying out for a metal band or something? What's going on? And, you know, it was interesting because, you know, I'd really gotten into his stuff at the time. Obviously, I'm a martial artist as well. So, you know, Double Impact, Death Warrant, all that sort of stuff that he'd just done before this, and Universal Soldier, of course, really leading into this movie, which was all him, stylizing himself a little bit different as a Cajun, ex-recon Marine. I mean, yeah, it got my attention. So I went and saw it with a mate, and just the opening salvo in the streets of the French Quarter where he's smashing that dude's head into the parking meter. I mean, that was enough to say this is not just a Van Damme film. And with the Kodo drummers from Japan doing the obviously the drumming in each of those scenes, I mean, and this was written by a Navy SEAL, so it had me written all over it. I'm telling you, folks, this is the movie for me, really to kick it off. And to me, it was a little bit disappointing then go and watch Nowhere to Run. And, I mean,
yeah,
movie kind of, but Chance Boudreaux, that should have been a series of Van Damme movies where he's just traveling around. Maybe he goes to Louisiana next, or he goes into, I don't know, Kentucky or Tennessee, and he's just, solving stuff.
definitely a character I could have seen more from. We'll get into that later. Kyle, when and where did you first see Hard Target with Van Damme?
Well, 93, I was a senior in high school, so I went and saw this in the theater. And of course, this is at the height of Jean-Claude Van Damme, really with his first go around. But what I remember more about this movie is when it came out on video, because I was working a video counter at the time when it came out on video, and this movie was just constantly rented out. And we had multiple copies, but this movie, you add in the John Woo factor, you add in the Jean-Claude Van Damme factor, and I think this was one of those movies because it didn't have a very long theatrical run. I think this was one of those movies, again, early 90s, really got its big money off of its VHS rentals.
That's an excellent point. I do remember it hitting the video rentals soon, not too far, but soon after it came out in theaters. And I remember seeing it in the theater. And the main reason actually that brought me to seeing this film wasn't necessarily Van Damme. It was John Woo. I was heavy into John Woo, the killer, Hard Boiled, and I started going back and watching all of his older films. He was becoming this cult director hero among action fans and Asian cinema fans, and this is when I started getting into Asian cinema, not just the old kung fu movies, but the current day type of action dramas. They were making a name for themselves outside of your typical kung fu flicks that took place years and years and years ago. And then that brought me into Korean action films. But John Woo was a legend, and this was his first American film. And I remember getting the VHS and everything. And then I remember early in my convention fandom, there was rumors of this other cut that was out there. And there's this bootleg VHS copy here called Fully Uncensored Version, Unrated Cut, all Woo. And it says with 22 minutes of extra footage. Basically, it's just it's extra action, extra violence, and a little bit of extra dialogue. But it was the only way I could find this was in conventions, because in conventions everything's legit. I had the DVD for a while, but hey, you know what, Adam? Going into this, I had to upgrade to the Blu-ray because it also comes with a digital copy, and you also have one there as well, right? Hold that
exactly.
up. Hold that up. I want to see that again. Yeah, it's pretty much like mine, but you got the Aussie version.
That version, I don't know if it's the same. From the viewing lounge, this one is. But you've got the certification for Australia, which is medium level violence, which is pretty much what they have in the VHS as well.
I had also picked it up on Laserdisc years and years later, just kind of, kind of a completist that way. But John Woo basically is the reason why I remember coming to this, guys. And I did want to show a picture here of John Woo on the set here. Going into this film, I want to have a John Woo conversation here. And Adam, I want to start with you. Did you know going into this film who John Woo was? Was he one of the reasons, or were you like Van Damme, Van Damme, Van Damme?
Well, Van Damme was the first reason I came into this, right? But I was aware of John Woo thanks to a friend from school, actually, who had basically been in video shops already working and gave us a preview disc of The Killer and Hard Boiled. So at least I knew how John Woo liked his eggs, hard boiled. But I knew what his, visual style straight away was. Oh, yeah, by the way, I don't know if you can see crumbs in the background there.
Nice.
But yeah, so he, the balletic displays of gunplay, slow motion, lots of dives and jumps and stuff like that. But I think the big thing for John Woo is that, he started cutting his teeth on kung fu films that Jackie Chan had done, and of course, Sammo Hung, Yuen Biao. All those, the Lucky Stars, basically were the guys that were getting directed by this guy until he moved into Andy Lau films, Chow Yun-fat, and of course, on, right? So we knew that he's got those. And the best one, of course, is exactly that, Hard Boiled. Every film, including this one, It is basically a retread just with a massive budget in terms of the stunts, not the stories, not the play of the characters and stuff like that. But you're going to know all those stunts if you go back to Hardball and The Killer, especially. But I think the big thing with him is it went right through to Redcliffe, which I still think is his piece de resistance. You know, it is the 300 pretty much of, that universe.
It's a good point. Kyle, your thoughts on John Woo? Were you aware of him going into Hard Target? Did you know who he was?
Oh, I most definitely knew who he was. That's kind of one of the benefits of growing up in Alaska too. Sometimes we would get unusual things on our VHS stores that wouldn't go to other places because we get just throw it there. It's going to Alaska. We don't care. So we would get some of those. We had a very good rental store that was locally owned, and he got all kinds of strange things that weren't the norm. So he was getting a lot of John Woo films, and so I was familiar with who John Woo was and some of the work he had done. And I know too there was a very big buzz about John Woo finally coming to the United States and what he was going to bring. And so when you teamed him up with one of the hottest action stars of this time frame, there was a lot of buzz for this film because of the Jean-Claude Van Damme connection and what a lot of people thought he might be able to bring out of Jean-Claude Van Damme that hadn't been brought out yet as far as an action star.
It's a good point. Speaking of Van Damme, here he is, shot from Hard Target. Look at that. Look at that mullet.
That's a mullet.
Kevin, I'm sorry.
My wife would disagree and say that, in the Lost Boys, Kiefer Sutherland had the best mullet, but I'm with you, Adam. This is the best mullet.
Nah.
Come on.
This is the best. I mean, you realize Kurt Russell was up for the role first. So, I mean, not that I could see him as a French Cajun, but at the same time, this is the mullet of all mullets. I mean, you don't get better than this.
God, I see this picture. I was just going to say, I see this picture now. I'm sorry, your mullet just went down to a 4.
So, okay. Rapid fire, guys. Give me your top 3 favorite Van Damme films. Adam.
Okay, Hard Target's first up. Second up, just for the sake of it, Bloodsport. Mm-hmm. And the third one is going to have to be an interesting one. It's Double Impact. He plays off himself well. Now, he's tried that a few times. Replicant was another one that he tried that with. But I really think, Double Impact doesn't get enough credit for, really working with Jeffrey Lewis in particular, one of the Clint Eastwood stalwart actors that was always there, the late, great Jeffrey Lewis. And then you get the reteaming with Bolo Yeung after Bloodsport. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know they're lifelong friends. They've been friends since the first day they met. And I think that's just lovely that when he is in Hong Kong, he's staying with Bolo.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kyle, top 3 Van Damme films.
Hard Target, Bloodsport, and it's kind of the third one's it's a little tough because you're starting to get into where they start running in the same. Double Impact is great, but I always have a very soft spot for Lionheart for whatever reason.
Lionheart, interesting. Yeah. Interesting. All right, I like that. Yep. Well, what's funny for me, because of the John Woo factor and some really great scenes in this movie, Hard Target was always my favorite. But it's been eclipsed, and I'm glad you brought it up, Adam, because Double Impact is actually my favorite Van Damme film, because you're right, he plays off well against himself because he plays twins, and I love the cast in that film. I love the shooting locations in that film. So for me, it is Double Impact, this one, Hard Target, and I love Time Cop. Kyle.
I was just going to say, if any of you had said Cyborg, I would have been canceling this podcast right now.
May I say something? You just mentioned Time Cop, and there is an actor in there that sadly has passed away in the last week. And it's a stuntman that's worked on all the movies that you love, guys. Revenge of the Ninja, all the Cannon films, American Ninja. And, of course, he was one of the bad guys that was hunting Max Walker in Time Cop.
Who was the stuntman that passed?
Stuntman Stephen Lambert. And Stephen had worked on all the Cannon films, particularly the ones that the director of American Ninja had worked on.
Furstenberg,
wonderful guy. Yeah, Avenging Force. Right. There's even a great documentary on that one, and I think a commentary on both with of course, the director and Stephen. And Stephen was right up there with Al Leong and, of course, all the others that had come up in the 80s. A fantastic talent and very sorely missed, mate. Rest in peace, Stephen.
Yeah. Well, guys, I want to give a quick plot description to Hard Target here. Chance Bordeaux is out of work sailor who's looking for work in New Orleans. Chance has been hired by a woman named Natasha Bender, who has arrived in New Orleans to find her father, former combat veteran Douglas Charles Bender, who is now homeless, where they discover Natasha's father has been murdered and has been the latest victim of evil mercenary Emile Fouchon and his partner Pick Van Cleef, who cruelly hunts combat veterans that are homeless for the amusement of their clients. When Chance's friend Elijah Roper is Fouchon and Van Cleef's latest victim, Chance then learns he is their next victim to take part in their hunt. Chased by Fouchon, Van Cleef, and the gang of mercenaries, Chance uses his fighting skills as he protects Natasha and takes on Fouchon, Van Cleef, and all of the bad guys as they have become the hunted and find Chance is a hard target to kill. See what I did there? All right, a little bit of development here, guys. After making Hard Boiled in Hong Kong, director John Woo decided to take an offer to work in the United States. We would find himself happier as a filmmaker with a preferable work pace and more reasonable hours. Woo was first offered the job in the United States by Universal Pictures chairman Tom Pollock, who had seen Woo's film The Killer. Universal was not eager to have Woo direct an entire feature and only agreed after what producer James Jacks called a difficult period of convincing. Universal was worried about having an Asian director on set who had limited command of English on a large-scale project. They hired American director Sam Raimi to oversee the film's production and to have him on standby if Woo was not able to fulfill his role as director. Raimi was very excited to work with Woo as he was a fan of his Hong Kong films. Raimi also was confident in Woo's directorial skills, stating that Woo at 70% is going to blow away most American actor-directors working at 100%. On his arrival in the United States, Woo went through several scripts before deciding on Hard Target, describing the script he received. Woo stated that, quote, some of them were good and some of them were very good, but the rest were simply martial arts movies, and I told producers that I had no interest in doing those kind of films anymore. I'd done a lot of them already. One of the scripts offered to Woo at this period was Face Off, which he turned down at the time, turned off by the science fiction aspect of the story. The script Hard Target was written by Chuck Farrer. Director Andrew Davis was interested in the script, but ultimately turned it down. Woo read Farrer's script of Hard Target, appreciating that it was a simple but powerful story with lots of feeling underneath. For a good action film, you need solid structure. Chuck gave me that. Woo also stated the story is less John Woo, but the visual aspect would be very John Woo. Farrer wrote the script originally based on the film The Naked Prey. After the script did not turn out, Farrer worked on the script influenced by the film Aliens. It became the basis for his comic Virus. The final attempt was a script based on the 1932 film The Most Dangerous Game. Farrer had the story take place in New Orleans to give an explanation of Jean-Claude Van Damme's accent. So there you go. Let's start with a little bit of open discussion about this, Kyle. And you know what? I'm going to start with your hot take. You didn't tell me what it was, but you have a hot take about this film. So, Adam, I know nothing about this. I told him to hold on to it until we started recording. What is your hot take?
So my hot take isn't just about this film, but it's about John Woo's American run that he had. And my hot take is this. I don't think John Woo's American run was a success. I think John Woo came into it with a lot of ideas of trying to do something different while being in an American film environment. I think he became lazy. I think he became very much just about the tropes in his films. And I think really it set him back as a director for a while until he finally went back to Asia and started getting back into a more comfort zone. I look at all of these films, and yes, while Hard Target and Face Off are cult classics, Broken Arrow, none of them reached huge success. Yeah, between having watched this for this podcast, watched Mission Impossible 2 for our Culture Clash franchise.
Do you mind if I just run off his films when he started in the States here? Okay, yeah. So first of all, he does obviously Better Tomorrow 2. These are all his Hong Kong films: The Killer, Just Heroes, Bolton Head, Once a Thief, Hard Boiled. Then he jumps to Hard Target, his first American film. Broken Arrow, Once a Thief, a TV movie. Face Off, Blackjack, Mission Impossible 2, Wind Talkers, Hostage, Paycheck, The Hire, Robinson's Lost in Space, and then it kind of goes on, and then I think he goes back to Asia, and he does Red Cliff 1 and 2.
I think he came to America, like you talked about in the breakdown, with different ideas and didn't deliver what was expected of him in America. And I think if you look at it overall, there's, like I said, there's some cult classic films in there, but it did not hit the critical success of what we expected from John Woo coming to the United States.
With his American projects, and I want to get your thoughts on this too, Adam, since you're the action expert here. Would you say that Hard Target and Face Off were probably his two best films, his American-made films, and then Broken Arrow kind of goes, it's fun, it's not great, but then it starts to go down from there? What do you think, Kyle?
You mean Adam?
Oh, yeah, Adam, yes. Sorry.
Okay, Kyle.
Well, I wanted you to retort to that, Kyle, as well. That's why I went back to you.
Let me retort.
Because I wanted to know where you think it went wrong.
Well, Kyle, you jump to it first, and then I'll lay down what I think.
I think Hard Target and Face Off are by far the two best things he did. But watching these films too, and going back with John Woo, he got himself caught into he was using the same tricks over and over. And I'm going to say this about any of the American John films, except Woo films, except maybe for Broken Arrow. If he uses normal speed for most of his films, all of his films get faster by about 20 minutes. With all the slow motion he uses.
That's true.
Yeah. In these films, it becomes a little, even in Hard Target, it's a little bit over there. And of course, the amount of pigeons that were killed in John Woo films is just... But in all seriousness, again, I think, like I said, this film and Face Off, I think, are definitely a little bit higher class. And then Broken Arrow is fun, but it starts going down. But none of them reach that critical process and were as good as what we were expecting John Woo action films to be in the United States.
Adam, please give us a retort to Kyle's take.
I don't really agree with you there, Kyle, personally. I think that, look, I think the real reason that he wasn't really able to go the full gamut was the holders that he had down on him when he did go over. Now, a lot of that is the film companies themselves trying to rein in John Woo. I think that's the thing that really made him smaller vision than you would expect a bigger sort of market. What I do agree with is Hard Target and Face Off are definitely his best pick there. But you know what? I actually think Broken Arrow is just as good. I really enjoyed that. The only thing I don't enjoy as much is they let Travolta just rock and roll as always. And I think that's the thing is in these bigger ones, Face Off is better, much better, except that when his stuntman has a mustache, we'll go into that another time. But what I mean is that, you know, like Travolta, especially with Tarantino, he was really reined in. It was a great performance, and it really should have been a tough director with him all the time. But because he's a big star and because he sort of, I think, didn't he produce one of those? I can't remember. But when he was working on those, he becomes his own character. It's movies like From Paris with Love. Reining in Travolta, you get an amazing performance. So I think that's
a very underrated action film. I'm glad you mentioned that film. That is a good movie.
Yes, it is.
And what was that other one that he did? This is not a Woo one, folks, but it's very much like a Woo one. But it's even got in the case. He's got two guns on the case. It's Travolta. It was only done a few years ago, and it's him racing around with an ex-cop guy, and they're just taking out the mob. That's the sort of movie I like with Travolta. But anyway, but yes, I think the thing is he got bored. I think that's what happened with John Woo. He got bored. He's working with Lundgren, with Blackjack. And he got to work with Ben Affleck, fell asleep on that movie without a doubt. It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. Yeah. But I think it all came together because we got an amazing performance out of Tony and Andy and all those great actors in Red Cliff. Now, if you haven't seen the director's cut of Red Cliff, you need to really get it and watch it. This is Woo with, there's slow-mo, but
I need to rewatch that. It's been too long. Yeah.
But I mean, there's the theatrical edition, which is, you know, really compressed. It's bad. But if you want to see, you know, that sort of period, Red Cliff 1 and 2, parts 1 and 2, the director's cut, go and see it. It is vintage Woo.
Guys, I wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what makes Hard Target stand out to you guys. What is it about it that, other than Woo's directorial debut here in the United States, this seems to be the one one of the movies that people will discuss a lot when it comes to 90s action films in general. Good director, good action star. It kind of seemed to hit like right at the right time. I don't hear people talking bad about this particular film. The only complaint that I get from time to time is the horrible accent by Wilford Brimley, but I wanted to get you guys' thoughts of why you think why does this movie work for you, Adam?
I think the big key thing is the look. The look is fantastic. I mean, the trench coat, the denim, even those, I don't know what you call those boots, the desert boots or whatever he's wearing. The company starts with C. It'll come to me. But they made those boots in the 90s out here in Australia, and they were huge. Everyone wore them because it was the look. I think even Keanu Reeves had them in Speed, if I remember right. But it was the denim, the dress shirts, even the daggier, what do you call it? Laborers tops that he wore. That really, I mean, it worked with. He hadn't dressed like that before. He was always dressing real fancy in Bloodsport and everything except for Double Impact when he goes, never in my life will I have black silk underwear. Like but I think the key is it looked the part. It looked like he was from the French Quarter. And you've also got the guys around him too, like Lance Henriksen's never looked so bloody good in this. He is great as Emile Fauchon. And Pick Van Cleef, Arnold Vosloo is the real star, I think, of the bad guys. He is so relatable. He's just a working guy. He just wants to get the job done. And if you look at a lot of what he does in this is great. It's just as good as his work in Blood Diamond. Oh, TIA, Denny, this is Africa. All that stuff. He's fantastic. And I think that's the key thing is the look was right. Even Dennis Fennell Thorson's Hawaiian shirt under his combat vest. Well, wouldn't you think, Kyle? It really sort of set it apart.
Yeah, Kyle, what do you think?
Yeah. So I think what works so well for this movie is it really hits everything that defines the apex of action films at this time. Obviously, you have Jean-Claude Van Damme at one of his heights of his career and one of the most unique looks for him in his career too, which I think makes this stand out. You have in this film too a concept of the human hunting, which is always a popular movie trope, and that we've seen other films.
Ice-T did it with Surviving the Game,
Yeah, Trespass is another one that comes. But you also have just the fact that this movie to me is a great film that is a transition film of periods, because it's got a lot of the corniness of 80s action films. You have that whole snake thing with the scene with the snake, which is just so outrageous, and you have a lot of things from the 80s, but you start seeing with John Woo involved and a lot of things, new tricks for the 90s and with the action film. So it's one of those movies that carries over generations here. And you add into the fact that you have Lance Henriksen, who has his own cult following, Arnold Vosloo in this, a very young Yancey Butler. You have a lot of those people. I recognize those faces, even if I don't necessarily recognize the name. And I think this is just one of those movies that over time, it's a word of mouth thing with Jean-Claude Van Damme. The more people have discussed it, this movie has kind of got its own legend to it at this point.
I think too, his mullet took a hit in like the late 90s, early 2000s, but now I think people look at it and it's become a thing to admire and revere a little bit, because damn, it's a good looking mullet.
It is. And Kevin, we're also missing the fact that he's got a great counterweight to him, which really, she starts the story. Witchblade herself, Yancey Butler.
Yeah, actually, let's talk about the rest of the cast here, guys. Obviously, we've hit on Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Yancey Butler, of course, was from Drop Zone and also Witchblade. She has a prominent role in this. It's her father was hunted. We also have Arnold Vosloo and Lance Henriksen working as a cool team that runs this human hunting game. These guys are great. And then, of course, we've got Wilford Brimley as Uncle Duvet. And, of course, the rest of the hunters here as well. I just want to get your guys' thoughts on the cast. We had the good girl cop that was helping them out as well. But yeah, let's give your thoughts on the rest of the cast here. Adam, start with you.
Well, let's start with Yancey. I think she's great in this. Like you guys, I mainly know her from Witchblade in this, and Drop Zone, of course. She's really good in that. She's a bit different character, obviously, in Drop Zone. But in this, she's trying to find out the reality of what was happening with her father, who is a war hero, and obviously has, gone into a harder time. He's homeless, all that sort of stuff. So it's hard for her. It's an emotional journey, and she's quite frankly a bit pissed off with what New Orleans police are doing. Nothing about it, really. But she realizes they can't because they don't know where her father is. And so she has to obviously work with Van Damme's Chance Boudreaux, who gives her a chance and obviously helps her out. And I think that's the thing is she needs that streetwise Cajun, warrior, if you like, And I think that's where there's a little bit of a Japanese influence here too. It's a bit of a man with no name, Yojimbo, fistful of dollars style to this. This is a Western, folks. All right. A lot of people miss that. John Woo's movies are Westerns. Why? Double guns, folks. It's gunslinging. Right. But with Van Damme, what he was doing is, and you see it at the start, remember the trench coat flips back, right? In that first fight.
Yeah.
And you're expecting a gun, aren't you? It's not a gun. Well, it is a gun. It's his leg, and that's his 6-shooter. Okay. So that's where they're trying to go with this. And I think with Yancey, it's great. She's not just the damsel in distress. She can fight.
Good point. Kyle, thoughts on the rest of the cast?
I think this is a very interesting cast. I agree with what Adam said. I think Arnold Vosloo actually steals this movie a little bit. He's very good in this. Lance Henriksen is just pure evil in this film. A very young Yancey Butler before she really hit it big and before she hit some of the road bumps that she hit in her career. The thing about Yancey too is she has a very unique look to her, especially in this film. Something with her eyes that just stands out with this. Wilford Brimley. I'm sorry, you just can't say anything bad about Wilford Brimley, no matter what role he plays. It's Wilford Brimley. You just have to love Wilford Brimley.
Diabetes.
I got to give a quick shout out to the Cassie Lemons who plays Detective Marie Mitchell, because I actually thought she was pretty good in this movie, and they did her wrong in this movie. I mean, they basically leave her dead in the street.
Yeah. For me, what really makes this movie for me is the villains. These two guys here, we talked about Arnold Vosloo and Lance Henriksen. These guys are legends, and the chemistry between them was fantastic. And I want to touch on that a little bit later. But I also too, I want to let you guys know a little bit of trivia. Douglas Bender, who is the guy you see killed in the beginning, it's Nat's father. That is actually the writer Chuck Farr. So. He had a cameo in the film as well. Well, guys, as you know, I always like to give a little, budget information here. A movie was about $18 million estimated to make. It made almost $75 million, so it made money. But as you mentioned earlier, Adam, I would have liked to have seen more of Chance. It's interesting how some action heroes didn't decide to bring back characters that they did. That would have been a really cool character. I think that he's got a lot to do there. But as we know, there is some critical responses here. Hard Target received mixed reviews on its initial release, praising the film's action scenes, but noting the poor story and Jean-Claude Van Damme's acting abilities. I saw nothing wrong with his acting abilities. Sorry, I disagree.
Well, the story was great, and the fact that it's two movies. You got the investigative sort of part of the movie that leads up to the street fight. Once the street fight kicks in, it's an action movie. So it really is a police procedural and then an action film.
Rotten Tomatoes, 60% on the fan meter there, 49% on the audience score. That was out of 40 reviews. The most satisfying entry in Van Damme's rise to glory during the early 1990s, smartly using the star's limited vocabulary and limitless flexibility to create one of the finest B movies of the decade. Siskel and Ebert. Roger Ebert stated that Hard Target is, quote, not very smart and it's not very original, but it is well made on a technical level. The stunts are impressive as an action picture. It's well made, but it never becomes more than a competent action, and I just can't recommend it for that. Gene Siskel also gave the film a thumbs down on the show, that they're on, stating that John Woo is a good filmmaker. Van Damme is pretty wooden. You notice the style in the film because there is not much substance. Ow. In Variety, they stated that Hard Target was a bristly, vigorous, occasionally brilliant actioneer starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, however, hampered by a B script with flat standard characters and subjected to repeated editing of the violent sequences to win an R rating. I don't know about that, really. I mean,
I don't agree with that. I like this review here. There's a review here on this page. It says a 5 out of 5 on the Hallenbach scale. Oh, that must be pretty damn good. And it says
Lethal Mullet, it's that Lethal Mullet guy, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Guys, I want to get your thoughts on any of your favorite characters, scenes, moments, or quotes. Adam, I got to start with you. What were some of your favorite scenes?
Okay, so I'm going to start with just a scene I just think is great because obviously the director had somebody who would turn out to be a good friend, Sam Raimi, working on the movie, and of course his brother's always there, Ted Raimi. And there's a scene where one of the guys who's a friend of Van Damme's character is getting hunted first. He's getting hunted by Pick Van Cleef and Emile Fouchon, and he's trying to find somebody to help him. Please help me. And he grabs Ted Raimi. Ted Raimi goes, I ain't got no change, man. And that is Ted Raimi, folks. Same guy in Darkman that has his head thrown out the top of the sewer by Liam Neeson. Gets run off. No, that's a great scene. But I think the big thing is for me is the opening in the French Quarter is fantastic. You're going to see a lot of the Universal Soldier stuntmen are in that scene. Actually, Arnold's stunt doubles in that one as well. Yep. Especially the guy that gets his arm snapped is the same one from the diner scene in Universal Soldier. Yes. I just want to eat. That one. So we got those. I love also literally the shootout in the middle of the street where they realize Chance Boudreaux is not to be messed with. And even, Pick Van Cleef is getting shot up and he's like, okay, we got ourselves a real player here. But the other one I like, and it's not really, I love the doves and all that sort of stuff, and the Henriksen fight's great. But the big one is the helicopters racing up the top of the bayou. That scene really changed things. And I think it's not relying on the physicality and flexibility of Van Damme. This is just vintage.
That's when Pick says, we can take him from the air.
Yes.
We can take him from the air.
I love it.
Kyle, what are some of your favorite scenes?
I'm with Adam. The opening fight sequence with Chance outside of the diner, where they kind of you really see what he's all about. I think it's very well done. I will say this though, I didn't realize it was so effective kicking people when they were wearing motorcycle helmets. He does it a lot in this film. But I think with this movie, what I find more interesting, it's not so much a favorite scene, but how this movie really feels like it's split into two. It's really kind of it really is a murder mystery, the first half of it, until they really get into the bayou. And then once they're in the bayou, then it becomes that really, truly all out hardcore action film. And I actually give Wu a lot of credit for this because he kind of just merges into that. It doesn't feel like all of a sudden it's just this, like somebody flipped the switch into this. It really does feel like it goes from that into this from a murder mystery into an action film. And I think he does a very, very good job with that.
That's a good point, Kyle. That is something that's overlooked, is the murder mystery that you're getting here. And this is where I find the script is actually good. And it's, yes, we've had let's hunt them and kill them stories, but this one's got its own little kind of twist to it. It's got some heart to it as well. And it's also got some really good characters. And I think the villains really help this film a lot. But, you guys are all missing the best scene in the whole movie, and that's when you knock out a snake and you take off his tail. I mean, come on, guys. And he sets up the trap to bite the bad guy. I mean, come on. Kyle, did you just facepalm me right now?
Yeah, I did because, but it's that kind of like good face. It's so good, it's bad. It's so bad, it's good because this is the part of Hard Target.
He knocks out a snake by punching it in the head. Come on,
right? Like I said, that's straight from that feels like it should be straight out of Commando.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also, don't you reckon we wouldn't have had these scenes haven't we for that tall bloody Steven Seagal with Casey Ryback making booby traps everywhere? This is why writing in Hollywood happened thanks to bloody Seagal.
No, what's even worse about that is when he bites the rattler off. No, those rattlers are a lot more attached than what him just biting it off would be.
I love the opening sequence too at the diner. You really get a great introduction to Chance and what he's about. I love the end fight scene in the warehouse with all of the old floats and stuff, and because there's lots of guns, and Adam, this is for you because whenever I like to guest on your Lethal Mullet, I love talking about the guns, and really to me there's one special gun in this movie, and I wanted to bring it up here, and this is Lance Hendrickson's gun here, the Thompson Center Arms Contender. This is a one-shot, it's basically a target pistol. Emile Fouchon, played by Lance Hendrickson, prominently uses the Thompson Center's Arms Contender single-shot pistol as his weapon of choice throughout the movie. Chambered to fire a .45 70 cartridge, seen hanging on the loops on his belt. The gun is routinely shown blowing up things whenever it's fired. Surely an exaggeration of the contender's power in real life. Another goof concerns the fact that this weapon is never fitted with any sights, which would make it aiming it accurately very hard indeed. This same model gun was previously used in Philip K. Walk as Mad Dog in John Woo's earlier movie Hard Boiled. And I'm just going to give a little tease too. It also makes an appearance in Hard Target 2, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later. But guys, this was just kind of a cool gun. Yes, it seems to be whatever it hits, it blows up. Maybe he's got special bullets chambered, but there was just something cool about this gun, was that it was a one shot. You see him having the little belt thing here. Adam, I got to get your take on it because you cover action movies all the time. You see a lot of good weapons here. What makes this weapon interesting to you?
I've seen this weapon in a few other films or something like it anyway. And a lot of it's in hunting films or movies are set around hunting. There's one is a B grade, very much like Southern Comfort, the Powers Booth movie with the Carradines. But this one, I like it. It is both antique and modern at the same time, using a fairly large caliber that is not explosive. It's just a higher caliber weapon, if you like. But I think for, Emile Fouchon, who is a civilized individual, it works for Lance. He's playing that sort of arty-farty sort of hunter, I suppose. You look at his outfit, you look at his house, he's well-to-do. Then you've got some other fantastic weapons in this. Obviously, the 30-06 was what Chance usually used, but a Gatorated. So he has a stainless steel shotgun, Remington, whatever it is, pump action 12-gauge shotgun, which is pretty much his scattergun of choice in this hunting weapon, maybe, whatever it is. But you've also got the Berettas, Tauras, lots of Glocks in this movie. Yeah. And they must have had Heckler and Koch on site because there's MP5s, there's even a H&K pistol used in this, and just a lot of straight up SD3 MP5s as well.
Kyle, your thoughts on guns in this film? I don't know if you're a gun guy or if you take note when it comes to guns in action films. Give me your thoughts on that.
I that's one of the things I think that makes this movie a little bit stand out too, is there's some very unique weapons in this. Obviously, Lance's weapon of choice. You have the spear gun that is used in this, which is basically a big piece of the center of the marketing of this film. You have at a time when the Glock was just kind of really coming into prominence in movies. So you have the classic Beretta, but you have the Glock, you have the bow and arrows used, but then you have this stainless steel shotgun that apparently has some of the most powerful shotgun shells in the world because it sends Lance Hendrickson sliding back about 50 feet after he gets shot with it. But no, I think that's actually, this movie has such a variety of guns. And I think that's kind of one of the other things that makes it stand out. And I think that's something that we've kind of gotten away from, is the bad guys or your hero having that unique style weapon that makes them stand out. I think we've kind of gotten away from that in film. And it's something I hope we can kind of get back to.
I agree. All right, guys, I got a little bit of trivia here for you for Hard Target, just a little bit here. As you had alluded to earlier, Adam, Kurt Russell was originally sought for the role of Chance Bordeaux, but they couldn't wait 2 years for it to film with him. The studio then went to Jean-Claude Van Damme, who met with John Woo while he was filming Double Impact in 1991 in Hong Kong. What kind of film would this have been if it was Kurt Russell, Adam? What do you think? Would it have been better, worse, just as good? What do you think?
Well, you got to think about too is when you bring in Kurt Russell, the movie changes straight away. It changes to one or two things. Now, he can be very serious, like Breakdown and obviously Backdraft, all that sort of stuff, or even Tequila Sunrise. Or it could be like Tango and Cash or Big Trouble in Little China or any of those movies where his natural sense of humor comes through. So I think naturally the first thing that goes is the martial arts. Second of all, we know he can do guns. Soldier, folks. Like, Tango and Cash. I mean, he's very comfortable around firearms, and obviously he's wide open, right? So he's very much somebody that knows how to handle weapons. It would be interesting to have seen him do John Woo style double gunplay. He hasn't really done that. I don't think that it would sort of liken to his style, but he does have a mullet, folks. And yes, the mullet looks glorious on that man. It just works.
It's true. Yes.
If he's not back in the morning, call the president.
I think too, if Kurt Russell is cast in this film, it's not in the French Quarter. It's not.
Oh yeah,
they
100%.
changed the locale of this movie.
That's a good point.
It'd be in Texas or something.
A couple more bits of trivia here. John Woo's original cut of the film ran nearly 2 hours and focused more on Fushan. Jean-Claude Van Damme and his editor locked themselves in an editing room for 2 days and re-edited the film for the producers. Van Damme stated that moviegoers were paying to see a Van Damme movie, not a Lance Hendrickson movie. Or Lance Hendrickson movie. Kyle.
Great piece of trivia, because this is actually one of the things that Van Damme has a rep for, is really high quality control of his films, maybe to his detriment. And I think maybe in this case it could have very well been that.
But it brings up an interesting point here, guys, and I want to get your thoughts on this. The strong chemistry between the villains, Arnold Vosloo and Lance Hendrickson, led one Universal executive to quip that he wished he would have gotten the pair their own film together. Now, whether they would have survived the end of this movie, you got to admit, Adam, that the chemistry between these two villains was fantastic. And I loved how they kind of went back and forth with each other. And then Lance is asking, and like, are you angry with me? He's like, and then Arnold's like, I don't get angry. I'm a professional. How cool would have it been if these guys continued hunts in other countries? Like they kind of like,
or just do a prequel TV series, show the previous hunts.
Yeah.
Like, this is a well-oiled machine, these two and their little team, and everyone's color-coded with their jackets and their bloody black helmets and all that sort of stuff. You wonder where Equilibrium could they look for the bad guys from?
There you go. Yeah. Kyle, your thoughts?
I think you do, like Adam said, you do a prequel film because they talk about, well, it's time to get out of this town. It's gotten hot. So obviously they've been doing this in other locations. So you could easily go back and do like a Hard Target kind of prequel thing with these two in it and explain why they had to move locations from that time. The focus is more on the bad guys. And I don't know if necessarily I think you could do that now. I don't know if you can do that in 1993.
Yeah. That's true. All right, guys. Video releases. I want to touch on that. This is a particular one that I have. Hard Target was released on Laserdisc and VHS in 1994. In the United States, the film was the 14th highest selling Laserdisc and the 46th most rented VHS film of 1994, but mostly in Alaska. Hard Target was released on March 20th, 2000. The DVD, the American DVD, also been released with DVD bundle packs that include other films starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. These DVDs include Hard Target, as well as Time Cop, Street Fighter, Lionheart, Sudden Death, and The Quest. And of course, that's a picture of my bootleg version.
We don't do those here. No, that is just a special Antarctic edition of Hard Target.
There you go. Guys, we need to talk about Hard Target 2. This is one of those not real sequels, but because it has 2 on the end of it, people think that it's sequel. It's more of like a reboot. But this movie is very, very, very important for 2 particular reasons. First of all, you got Mr. Nepper, who plays the villain in this, and he uses the same weapon. Oh, hold on, I gotta highlight you here, Adam. Hold on. There we go. Hold that up. There you go. Yes, I got a Blu-ray copy of it as well. Yeah, there you go. Hard Target 2. But Robert Nepper uses the same weapon that Lance Hendrickson does. But for me, this film introduced Scott Adkins to me, the guy who has been steadily working a lot of B action films. He's been in now some major blockbuster movies, including a couple of was it Doctor Strange and a bunch of other stuff. And he's got his own podcast now. I went and watched his ninja films. I haven't watched all of them yet. I think Avengement is probably one of my favorites. Yeah. Adam, I wanted to get your thoughts because I think I saw it and actually liked it. I was expecting to be bad, but I liked it too because Rona Mitra plays a villain in this. She's one of the women, one of the people that hunt Scott Adkins. But I wanted to get your thoughts on Scott Adkins. And was this your introduction to him?
So this is not my introduction to Scott Adkins. It was Boyka that was my introduction to him, of course, on the Undisputed series as well. Scott, his ninja movie was another one that was a huge one for me to get into. But as you mentioned, also the great one, Avengement, his gangster flick, which of course has as a bad guy in it. I won't spoil who who the character is, but the actress from Cliffhanger, and of course the guy that Lloyd Soccer, that guy. But this movie's fantastic. You also get Tamura Morrison in this. Hey, bro, I'm gonna
stars Scott Adkins. It stars Scott Adkins. Robert Nepper is the main villain. Rhoda Mitra, Antung, and yes, Tamura Morrison. Yep.
But Bobby Nepper is one of those just amazing guys that pops up everywhere. Star Trek: The Next Generation, Heroes, this film, The Day the Earth Stood Still. What I love about him, there's a certain magnetism with the screen. He's talking to you. Yeah. When he does his performance, his eyes, he kind of he goes off the screen. There's something about that actor, but it also weird that he looks like my neighbor.
Kyle, have you seen Hard Target 2? Because I know I've talked about it.
I need to see this because I haven't. But Kevin, I first of all, I have to pull a Zach Morris timeout on you right now. I haven't done this in a while because, how dare, as much as I love Scott Adkins, Robert Nepper is great, but the number one reason is Roma Mitra, Kevin. If the answer is not Kate Beckinsale, it's Roma Mitra.
If you can't get Kate Beckinsale, you get Rona Mitra. Yes, she is so hot in this film.
No, you just take Rona Mitra. Kate Beckinsale here.
Yeah, and I mean, come on. We know she can do the action. We've seen Doomsday, so I just need to throw that up. But on Scott Adkins, I know that there's a lot of general American audience who might not be familiar with Scott Adkins' work. He really hasn't had that huge film. But if you want a great introduction to Scott Adkins that is also very funny, he did the movie Day Shift with Jamie Foxx. That was a Netflix original where Jamie Foxx plays the vampire hunter, and he is in it. He gets his action off. We get to see his incredible martial arts skills, but he is hilarious in that movie as well.
His acting is actually on point. He's a very good actor as well as a martial artist. And also, too, he has a moment he chews up in the newest John Wick Chapter 4.
Yes, he does.
Plays, I think it's a Russian villain with a fat suit on. Mm-hmm. And he gets in a full-on fight with John Wick in that suit, and it is awesome.
But Kevin, we're missing the biggest point of this great actor is that he's now also got his own show called The Art of Action, which shows all these great interviews with all the people he stars with and people that you enjoy talking to, Dolph Lundgren, Daniel Bernhardt from these ones too, right through to now Keanu Reeves as well.
Yeah, I've become a huge fan of Scott Adkins, and check out Avengement. That's probably my favorite that he does.
Avengement, yep.
His acting is on point there, and man, that movie is just so darn good. All right, guys, we're going to wrap things up here. So I want to kind of close out with some closing questions here. This is called the Then and Now segment, guys. Your perspective then and your adult perspective now. When you first saw this, of course, guys, we were, going in our teens to early 20s when this came out. I kind of want to let you know I want to ask you how this movie's changed for you at all. Has your opinion changed on certain things? Kyle, I want to start with you.
So this is a very interesting question because I actually was thinking about this after I finished watching the film before this podcast. And it's actually a point I want to bring up to you guys and get your guys' thoughts on this, is watching this film and knowing how good John Woo is with action. But I look at this film now after seeing how action films have evolved, mainly thanks to the guys from the Raid films. We have that wonderful series out now, Warrior, and just how action films have evolved without using the slow motion, with really how much the level of martial arts has gone up in action films since The Raid and going on from there. I think Hard Target is such a great representation of its time, and especially as you said, Kat, when you look at it perspective, when you see it for the first time at our ages when it came out. But I look at it now, and I just am amazed to see how much action movies have evolved since Hard Target came out, and how they're just on a completely different level from Hard Target. Hard Target is a great representation of its time and a great movie for its time, but it is definitely starting to show its age when you look at how action movies are today.
Age in a good way, I assume.
Well, yeah, age in a good way, age and just reflective of its time period. I'm not going to say it's bad. It's just it's more of a thing of how much things have evolved since Hard Target came out as far as action films go.
Adam, now and then, your thoughts on how you first felt about this film and how it's evolved now.
Oh, it's easy. It was great then, and guess what? It's great now.
Easy peasy. Yeah. I didn't really appreciate a lot of the elements that this movie was showcasing, and you know, to your I guess your casual fans, this was just another action film, because the 90s had some great action films. You know, 80s obviously has its own genre, but 90s we can't count them out. They had a lot of good action films. And this kind of kept things going. This came out in '93, and you know, it was early, even a couple of years before that. You know, it started out well and it just kept going. And I feel that there's certain scenes in this movie that I think are really memorable and that stand out, and that's why we look back fondly on this film. And it's also, I think, one of the high points in Jean-Claude Van Damme's career, because of the character that he played in this, and his iconic look, and of course the villains that really helped showcase this one. And I've just grown to appreciate it more. And you know, mullets. So guys, give me your final thoughts on this film. Kyle, I'm gonna start with you.
My final thought: this is a great Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. I think it's one of the must-sees in the Jean-Claude Van Damme collection of films. I think, again, you're catching John Woo when he's first coming to America, so you're still getting some energy from him and a little bit more of him trying to work within the elements that he has. I think it's just one of those films that you can always go revisit, when no matter where you're at it, you can pick up and get an idea of what's going on. It's again so representative of the times. You have a great hero, but the villains are just something a little extra special. And that was something that was very common in the 80s and 90s, early 90s action films. And Kevin, there's one other thing we were talking about, what we would like to see happen with Chance Bardot later on. I'm just going to say he went and did his seaman job once he got paid. And somewhere along the line, he ended up in Harlan County and had a little crossover with a guy named Crowder and a guy named Gibbons. And I'm just
had a little Justified going on. Adam, I want to get your final thoughts on Hard Target. What you got?
This film is something you need to see. It is the highest point of Van Damme's career. It never got as good as this. I mean, Time Cop is great, but you wouldn't have him moving on to that science fiction epic if it wasn't for this movie. This movie is something that, you know, obviously launched John Woo into America and international audiences outside of the martial arts and balletic gunplay cinema. It is a film which is two films. It's an investigative, police procedural, and then it's action as well. So you've really got the two worlds, you know, an action thriller and this massive gunplay film. This is great. You has to be seen on the biggest screen possible. If you haven't got it, what are you doing? Get it.
Well said. Yeah. I'm going to hold mine up too. There you go. And another thing I love about this film too is it's only like an hour and 34 minutes. It gets right into it. It's not boring at any time. It's got some really interesting characters in it. I love the setting, Louisiana, New Orleans type of setting. You can't go wrong with that. And I think that when it comes to a directorial U.S. debut of one of the best action directors of all time, I think he hit it out of the park personally. And this is in my top Jean-Claude Van Damme films that I said earlier. And being 30 years old, that's the thing I can't quite wrap my head around, to be perfect. I mean, Adam, we were like, this is 30 years old. Are we that old?
Oh man,
God,
it doesn't register because it feels so modern. I think that's the thing. What don't you reckon, Kyle?
Yeah, Kyle.
I just want to say too, Kevin, I'm a little surprised that you would consider this his ultimate apex, because we all know his appearance in Friends.
He did have a good cameo in Friends. This is true. Well, Adam, Kyle, thank you guys for joining me for a Couch Potato Theater Hard Target 1993 30th anniversary. Jesus, oh my God, man, do I feel old already. This is the Fandom Podcast Network, and if you're listening to this, make sure you also check out the video on the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel. Please subscribe, share. We'd appreciate that. Our master feed on our audio podcast is fpnet.podbean.com. Check us out on all major podcast platforms, which includes Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Fandom Podcast Network is also on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram and Twitter /X now, I guess. My name is Kevin. I am on Twitter /X, Instagram, and Threads at Spartan_Phoenix. Kyle, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter /X at AKyleW, and also on Instagram Threads at AKyleFandom. I'm going to go see now if the gumbo is a little less tragic.
Yeah, I'm hungry. I want gumbo. Adam, you are always been part of the Fandom Podcast Network family, and you have created a wonderful little niche in our network by covering some really great action films with your show. Tell us about your show and what you got going on next with it and how people can find you.
So we are, of course, part of the FPN, the Fandom Podcast Network, and the show is a Lethal Mullet podcast, looking at 80s, 90s, and beyond action cinema and some niche movies of that time as well. And the big thing is really celebrating a lot of B grades on there too. So we're not just looking at the A grade cinema, because I mean that's what we loved in the 80s and even beyond, was the direct to video pretty much. Now it's streaming and all that sort of stuff, but we cover all that on there. We've just recently done Starship Troopers. We've also done another look at They Live, because it's almost been, well, it's close to about 25 years for that one too. Well, no, longer. Yeah, far out. And then we also did Starship Troopers Roughnecks, which was the animated series, which doesn't get enough love, folks. I personally think it's a great series. A little dated now, but, you know, you got to give it to Verhoeven. He saw a bit of cash there. He went, I can make this. I can make this. You know, and then obviously we've done a look at Brandon Lee's Rapid Fire last night, which will be going out on Tuesday. Great film, Powers Booth.
The other great Brandon Lee film. Yes. Well said. Yep.
Oh, 100%. And folks, I will be looking periodically at a few more. I've covered The Crow a few times. I'm sure Kevin will join me on a look at The Crow on Lethal in a few months' time. But I'm also going to be looking at Legacy of Rage, his 1986 Hong Kong debut. And you've got to get Ernie Borgnine in there. Bit of Airwolf action, Laser Mission.
That's right. Yes.
Catch us at The Lethal Mullet on all socials. See how easy it is. And, of course, on FPN.
Nice. Kyle.
Real quick, before we close up shop, too, I wanted to give recognition. Adam talked about a stuntman who passed away earlier. A great person who was in a lot of 80s films. He's always kind of like the bouncer bad guy, or the kind of the roughneck henchman. Professional wrestler Terry Funk passed away a couple of days ago at the age of 79. And probably for most of you, you'll remember him either in Roadhouse or Over the Top as one of the heavies in those films. But he was loved in Hollywood too. And he had a lot of appearances in a lot of films in the 80s during that time. But he's been in a lot of couch potato theater type films. I just wanted to give him a quick shout out.
Well done. Well done. All right, guys. First of all, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this production of Couch Potato Theater Hard Target 1993, celebrating its 30th anniversary. I'd like to thank my guest, Kyle. Thank you as always, and Adam. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you, brother.
Always fun, and always I'm dodging. I'm getting better at dodging arrows.
Check out Hard Target, guys. All right, guys. Until next time, we will see you on the couch. Thank you, and goodbye, everyone.